Good morning and welcome to this week's Slice of Advice. What a week it's been. A week since we had an earthquake here in Melbourne, which is I'm kind of done with living through real life events. But today we are going to be talking to Scott Biersack, and I'm really, really excited to bring him to you. If you don't know who Scott Biersack is, you may know him better as You Bring Fire, and he is just amazing. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory, but I'm sure that he'll go into more about him when he gets here. But, and of course, Wong has joined straight away. We do love it. We do love it. So I actually met Scott Biersack officially at Letter West in Utah about 2 years ago. Myself and I am the Wong, my good friend Matt Wong, we both ended up going to Letter West in the middle of the Utah desert to join 30 other lettering artists to kind of experience and enjoy and share the lettering journey together. So while we were there, we actually made Scott Biersack our honorary Australian because he does love a good Australian accent. I will be very surprised if it doesn't come out in this 45-minute hour, this next lot of time, because he loves an Australian accent. Now, before he does arrive, I wanted to share with you, if you haven't already jumped on it, I highly recommend you jump on my billable hour calculator, helping you calculate your rates, calculate the value of your time based on your unique circumstances. So by jumping on the billable hour calculator, you'll be able to put in what you want as your salary each year, how many hours you want to be working, any of your expenses that you have, and there's a whole heap of there, so there might be some that you might not have accounted for or missed, and it's going to tell you exactly how much you need to be charging for your billable hour, which, I don't know about you, but I like when I get told that these are the facts rather than going with a gut interaction of going with, oh, maybe I should charge this, maybe I should charge that. So if you can see the math and you can see how it actually gets put out to you and go, okay, cool, this is where I should be charging, this is how I should be charging, great, sorted for me. Now, I'm very, very, very excited to invite my good friend, because he's definitely not Aussie, but he does love a good Aussie accent. So, come join us, Scott. I'm really excited. He's here!
G'day.
Told ya. In the intro, and I'm like, this is our honorary Aussie, and let's be honest here, he's probably going to go straight into the Aussie accent because he cannot resist it.
Of course, yes. I won't do it the whole time. I needed to get it out of my system.
It's so not out of your system. It's so far not out of your system. It's like
not
very
at all.
deep in there.
Yeah, still there for sure.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Wong has requested getting some g'days in the chat. So if you are in the chat,
G'day.
chuck a good day in the chat, in the comments, and we'll start. So I was telling him a little bit about how you and I met. So I know, sweet. So our kind of creation of relationship, friendship story technically starts on the couch of Letter West, where you're sitting there doing amazing stuff, basically making minds melt via your laptop. And I've gone,
thank you.
Hi, I'm Jazz. And you went, hi, I'm Scott Biersack.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
So if you've been following Slice of Advice for a little while, you would have noticed that a couple of weeks ago, I had my good friend Austin Saylor on here. And Austin and Scott know each other. And so we ended up having this mutual friend. And that's a really cool thing about being in creative community, is that everyone seems to know everyone in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
For sure.
So for those who don't know you, Scotty, I'd love you to start off by saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. Give us a little bit of a insight into the world of You Bring Fire / Scott Biersack.
Of course. For those of you that don't know me, I am Scott. I'm a graphic designer, illustrator, now exploring music, so I could call myself a musician at some point, maybe.
Let's do it. From now, we're calling you a musician.
I like it. Yeah, I'm going pretty deep into that. But aside from that, I mostly focus within everything lettering, typography, type design, sign painting, whatever typography related, you name it, I do it.
Nice. I love that. I kind of feel like we can start coining a phrase for you of like designer of notes and melodies.
Ooh.
Yeah. Like
Okay.
just like create something for yourself. Like, I've coined for myself the design superwoman and pricing queen. We should maybe make a fire beats, like something that's just so out there.
Yes. At some point, we will definitely have some kind of name to explain everything that I do.
I don't know if it can be encompassed in a single name.
No, probably not.
And that's the cool thing about being a creative is you have so many different outlets and different ways of expressing. I myself, we connected a lot over creation of music as well. Even way back then, you were like kind of interested in it, and I was like, hey, I used to be
Yeah.
in musical theater, and
Yep, I remember you telling me that.
used to be a Lady Gaga impersonator way back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But it's all
Oh
like
man.
creative expression, right? It's all about
Yes.
finding our way to create something that exists. I think I was Mary Kate McDevitt when we were there. She was like, find the joy in creating something that didn't exist yesterday.
That's pretty spot on.
Yeah. So with your freelance career, tell us about kind of what that's looked like so far.
Oh boy.
Mainly the design side of things, because I think that that's kind of where we're heading, and then we'll start talking about like pricing and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean if we take it all the way back, my design freelance career sort of started by luck and chance, I think. I was working at an advertising agency at the time, and I was simultaneously exploring lettering and illustration and posting that stuff on Instagram through this project that I deemed Project 365. So I posted a new piece every day. And from that project,
That's hard.
it's
Like,
incredibly hard. It's honestly very draining. I don't think I could ever do it in this day and age, but at the time, I think I was 19 or 20, and I just had all kinds of energy, I guess, to somehow do that while simultaneously juggling so many other things.
because now we're both
Um,
in like our 70s and 80s. So,
exactly.
back when we're young whippersnappers.
Yeah, like I'm about to hit 72, so
Oh,
I
congratulations.
thank you. So I don't think I could do it anymore just because of burnout. Ultimately at the end of that project, I definitely hit burnout. But anyway,
Hmm.
besides all that, I got a number of freelance projects that happened because of this self-initiated project. And that's kind of like been the turning point almost that allowed me to realize like, oh, I could do freelance full time or at least start off part time.
Hmm.
Because at the time I thought, I'm going to work at an agency for the rest of my life just because it's so easy, essentially. You clock in, you design some stuff, and you clock out. And you don't have to like worry about too much.
Yeah.
And
What a beautiful theory for being working in a studio, because you just
yeah,
know that like
right,
if you leave at 5, you get looks.
right,
Or if you leave
right.
and you think of something, you're like, oh my God, I need to do the things. I need to do the stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean, at the time, I was so young too. I was just like, I didn't really care too much about being this sort of like top dog sort of designer, and I still don't to this day. But I didn't have like that much of an emphasis on like pushing myself, I guess, if that makes sense. So, um, yeah, that's kind of like, I guess, how it snowballed into where it is now. Like I started in that point of realizing, oh, I can kind of do this. And then, the freelance kept picking up. And the nature of freelance too is like you kind of have to be nimble and willing to take on anything that kind of comes your way.
Especially
And
in that first
that's,
like year or two.
yeah. So I've just said yes to everything, said yes to pretty much every opportunity that came through. And, it's kind of like propelled me into the point that I'm, here and now in this point. It's been, a weird journey. It's never been like I have this all planned out type of journey.
And I think
Um,
that when you do say, oh, it's all planned out, it is the surest way for it to not work. Like the
yeah, 100%.
surest way for it to go completely haywire, completely off.
Yes, I completely agree. I don't think it's a good idea to have everything planned out because you kind of just want to let life happen and you don't like if you don't let's say you don't meet one of these goals or expectations you set for yourself, then you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure to a certain degree as well.
And it's
Um,
not even the failure, it's the like how much that stops you in your tracks. And you're like,
yeah.
now I have to wallow in this a little bit
Yeah,
just to get over it. Because
exactly.
if you bury it, it
Right.
will fester.
That's right. Yeah, and you kind of like have to go through that sort of like grief period almost, where you feel like you lost a part of yourself almost. So anyway, I mean that was kind of like a long-winded answer to the
Love a
question, but
long-winded answer.
hopefully that sort of answers the question. It's never like a point A to point B situation.
Definitely not. I can definitely attest to that. Moving across the country to pursue musical theatre, only to run back into the loving arms of graphic design a year later and be like,
Yeah.
Mommy, it hurt me." But like it was definitely something that you have all of these experiences and these things that seem like a point like point A to point Z, and you've got all these letters and you think they're going to line up in a straight line, but they are
Right.
literally like all over the place.
Yeah.
And recognizing that they actually, like, they may not look like they're linked at all,
Yeah.
but they
But they
have a
are.
massive impact. Oh, they so
Yes.
are.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I fell into, or at least, took on the experience of going to the Type Paris program. Like, I was like in this weird funk where I was like, oh, I need something to like creatively, rev up my engine essentially and like, you know, get me excited about life again. And I was like, yeah, another type design program sounds great. I'm just going to go to Paris real quick. And, I happen to
Oh, why
have the
not?
money. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I
I
just
did the same thing with Letter West.
Yeah, that
I
too.
I
That was
was there
another
30
thing.
minutes beforehand and left 30 minutes after. Like, it was like, let's go.
Yes. So, I mean, and that's kind of part of it too. It's just like I didn't have any of that planned. It happened like within a month. I was like, should I do this? Should I do this? And then like a week went by and I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna do this. Yeah, all right. And I didn't like really consider anything else. It's just like, fuck it, like let's just do this thing. And that's
Mhm.
been my entire career.
How do you summarize your career? Fuck it, do the thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of how it feels.
That's good though. I mean, like, you learn so quickly when you throw yourself in, like, so quickly. You
Yeah,
learn what works and you learn what really doesn't.
right. And I am very thankful and I don't regret any of those sort of decisions that I made. It's all been kind of like um, you know, like you said, fuck it, let's do it and see what happens. And at the end of the day, or at the end of whatever this thing is, like you can at least know within yourself, like, okay, I at least tried. Now let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So,
So to kind of segue into pricing sort of side of things, do you take that same sort of attitude when it comes to pricing your work? Like, do you sit there and go, fuck it, here it is, let's do it? Or do you, so basically, do you agonize over the pricing, massively get in your head about it, or are you normal?
yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the project. There's
Yeah.
so many factors that go into pricing. And even after, pricing stuff out for 9 years, at this point. It's still a hassle. It's still a pain in the ass. I still consult other friends to be like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Like, it's never like a hard and fast, like, this is exactly how much you should charge. It's always like, well, you have to consider this. And so, with that said, I don't know. It kind of just depends on the project. Most of the time, I have a gut reaction. Like whenever a project comes through, I'm immediately like, okay, I think this will cost, at least $3,000 or something, right? So I have like a baseline,
Yeah.
and then I take the time to sort of like digest it a bit and compartmentalize and try to figure out, okay, what's the licensing, how much time do they want to license it for, all the variables involved,
Mhm.
and then try and figure out a price from there. But I know it's like it's never an easy process. It's always a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and Chanel Kristen just said it's so reassuring to know that everyone consults friends for pricing feedback, and it's so true. I mean, I
Yeah.
consulted you on behalf of someone else the other week, because, you know,
Right.
one of the best ways to try and work out how to charge a particular client is to find someone else that's worked with that client and ask some questions. Like,
Yeah.
ask, you know,
I
what do you think?
100% agree with that. Yes, you got to do it. It just makes your life so much easier.
And holds us all accountable as well, because if we
Yeah.
end up like lowballing a client and then they come to the next person and you're like, oh no, I just lowballed that, so
Right.
good luck. Like,
Right. Right. So, and that's another thing to consider too, is like, okay, well, if they hired this person, how much would they charge? And you're like kind of calculating that into like how you would price things too, depending on like if you know, who the client is and who they actually reached out to. Because most of the time, clients are like, at least if it's like a bigger project, they're going to reach out to at least like, let's say 5 illustrators, and they're going to ask for different quotes and, you know, see different portfolios and try and like weed out, you know, what makes the most sense for the pricing situation. Like there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the back end that we're not even thinking about most of the time too.
yeah. And I
So,
think that something that's really relevant that any designer in any situation needs to hear these kind of words.
yeah,
Clients aren't always looking for the cheapest option. They're
this
not.
is true. Yeah,
They are
100%.
so not. They're finding the situation that works for them. And yes, if that ends up being the cheapest option and they get like 80% of it done, they might go with that rather than paying 3 times as much to get probably more than what they actually need. And that's a
Hmm.
kind of, you know, the pricing for the actual purpose and pricing for the situation is really, really important, because
Yeah,
you could be completely stuffing it up by like being like, I'm going to also give you the kitchen sink. And they're like, you know what? We have a kitchen sink. I'm so sorry.
exactly.
Eek. So do you
Yeah.
tend to price your, like I do the same thing as well when I have like a phone call, and I literally write down on a post-it note, this is valued at this much, just so then I've at least got it written down somewhere. So I don't get to like when I'm doing the quote and being like, hey, Jazz, maybe you should charge less just to get
Right.
the job. And it's like, well, no,
Right.
no.
Right.
So do you tend to do more of like a project base and then plus licensing? Do you consult the value? And do you touch on hourly? Like, do you do like hourly work as an exchange?
Yes.
That was 3 questions. So
All
like bam,
great
bam, bam.
questions. Okay. First question was, repeat the first one for me again.
Actually, no, let's start from the end and work backwards. So do you do any hourly work for any clients?
Hourly. Most of the time, no. The only time like an hourly is somewhat involved is if somebody asks for my day rate, and my day rate is calculated somewhat by my hourly. And so that's kind of like, but like the hourly's never given to the client. The client only knows what's the flat day rate, right?
Yeah.
So the
So it's
only
kind of
time
like a
like,
packaged up of hours. Like here's a
yeah,
box of hours. There's approximately 8 in there here.
exactly. And so the only time I guess like an hourly may come into play is after the fact. Like, let's say I say to a client, you have 2 rounds of revision, and if you want anything outside of that, then we'll charge hourly.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's not the case. I've almost never hit that point because clients understand, like, okay, yeah, we have 2 rounds of revision, and like that's it. If they do want revisions, it's usually like an entirely different scope. And so I always have to like price out, you know, whatever that is. So I've never
Yeah.
actually hit this hourly point of like doing the secondary revisions or whatever too often. It's happened like once or twice maybe.
Yeah.
But that's generally the only time I'm using hourly, because I think an hourly rate can kind of box you in a certain manner.
Kind of
So
penalize you for being faster.
exactly. Like I'm a really fast designer. I have found out, and I think it's from, I'm not trying to brag or anything. But you know, I think it's just because of the advertising agency that I used to work at. We had to just churn stuff out super quick. And so that was like the beginning of my career, and it sort of set me up for success, obviously, to this point, where I can just like concept stuff pretty quickly, like, you know, whip out a concept sketch and let's say a client's paying me for a day rate and I finished the entire day's work in like 3 hours. I kind of like twiddle my thumbs a little bit sometimes and like try and ideate a little bit more here and there, but like I'm pretty quick about stuff. So,
And I feel like if you can, like that actually ends up making you more valuable. So you can't be sitting there going, okay, say for instance, my day rate is $1,000 and
right.
I do everything in 3 hours, I'm not going to really just get like 3 hours worth of my day rate
Right.
for something that is like massively more valuable.
Right.
And I've actually probably solved the problem faster. Therefore, like, 2,000, 3,000, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another thing to consider with day rate stuff is like, of course, the client is booking you for that entire day. So let's say, they might disappear and they don't have any more work for you to do. That's on them. You still get paid for that time because you're booking out your entire day and you can't work on anything else technically because that slot of time is given to, X, Y, and Z client. So you should be getting paid the full day rate, even if you do finish it in 3 hours. Like that's not something to get sort of penalized for.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time when clients kind of go away and go, okay, we've got to go and consult with everyone in the office, including the janitor. Can you hold tight?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the clock stops. And I think a lot of designers do get caught out by that because they feel like, imagine it's that you're actually sitting in their office. If you're sitting in their office, you're not going to do other work. And if you're sitting there and you're waiting for them to come back, like that's opportunity that you're kind of sitting there ready for them. They've got you for the day. If they've got something else that they want to do, cool, let's work, let's do it.
Exactly. They should be sort of like proactive about that and be like, oh, well, okay, we're waiting for this feedback. Here's this in the meantime, right? Like if I were the one paying $1,000 a day, I would make sure that person is busy all day. I am not going to be like, I don't know, having that sort of like,
I don't know, man, I'll come back to you. Like,
right. I wouldn't do that. It just seems like a huge waste of money, but a lot of clients, they're just like, they're able to do it. So
I actually had a job. It's just the weirdest job a couple of years ago. So I used to be a creative recruiter. So it meant that anyone who had a designer or a creative that went on holidays or sick leave or anything like that, I would be like a seat filler at an awards show. You just go in there and you do the thing. And I had a job where they were like, we have our main designer on leave for a month. Come in. We just need you to be there if we have stuff. I read every single Harry Potter that month.
And you got paid to read
I got paid to read Harry Potter. But
That's the best.
They weren't paying for my time and my skill and my expertise. They were paying for the access to me. And that's kind of like, that's what a day rate or a retainer or those kind of organizations of time and money are all about, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And now the other question was project. Do you tend to quote in project rates or like project plus licensing? How do you kind of formulate that?
Yeah, for me, I think it makes the most sense to price it out in sort of chunks. So yes, I'll have the project rate itself for the work that's being done. Then you're going to have the pricing for the actual licensing that's attached to this work. That way, there's a lot less confusion that happens with clients, especially in, the illustration and lettering game. You're working with licensing pretty frequently. And so it sort of like prevents that confusion from happening where the client's like, well, how much is the licensing if we do X, Y, and Z? There's like a million variables there for the licensing. So it just kind of makes it easier on myself and the client to understand, okay, this is how much, this thing is. And if we wanted to change the licensing to whatever, then that's kind of like the way to do it in my eyes.
And also if they come back and they want to relicense, then you have to kind of go through the whole process of separating out the license from the creation fee. It does tend to get a little bit confusing, right?
100%. I haven't had too many opportunities of like the relicensing happening, mostly because the work that I'm doing is very custom to the client. So when I do have that happen, yes, it makes it so much easier to just like relicense it, just charge them the licensing fee alone, or at least somewhat of a discounted rate depending on what the licensing is. And just go from there. So, and
it's all situational and reflective. I mean, I feel like that seeing the value of a bespoke license or a bespoke situation makes a client feel like they're not just another cookie cutter, not like really accessible. It's not like just take it off the shelf. It's let's tailor this to you. Let's make this work for you because your business is unique.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then value. I think value and value-based pricing is probably something that I've kind of really dove into this last couple of years and actually really understanding, okay, well, what's actually the value I'm bringing? Yeah, I finish it in 2 days, but it's what 10 people would usually do over a week. Like, finding out the value as well as kind of what the value is to the end client. So do you consult or consider value-based pricing within your space?
That's a good question. I guess in terms of value, you mean in terms of like the value to the client. Like, let's say this end product is like, 5 million people are going to see this thing. What's the value to the client? How much money they're going to make from this one thing that I'm creating for them, right? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
So it's basically any value that you're generating, considering that when you actually quote it. So like it could be value to the client, it could be value to the end customer. It could be the value of like solving the problem really quickly and how that is like separated from your actual like time that you're putting in and effort and skill. Like if you can solve it really quickly, it's probably more valuable and stuff like that. So do you kind of think about that when you're quoting?
Yes and no. Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the project, and I know I keep saying that, but like every project,
there's nothing wrong with that.
I know every project that I am pricing out is truly unique. There's very rare opportunities where I'm like referencing a previous project because every variable about a project is completely different. So it's hard to say, but in terms of like value and like, how many people are going to see it, or if it brings value to me in my portfolio perhaps, or if it brings value to, the studio that hires me and their client is the studio's client and the studio hires me, and like what's the value that the studio is getting. So
and it also depends on like how the studio itself is calculating the value to the client, so that you can, like, if you're charging more than what they're charging them, like they're gonna be like, no, I don't want to. Now I do have to say, come on, darling, Teresa wanted to come say hi.
Oh,
hey, hi.
So cute.
Oh, we're boring you. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's just like, get me out of
here. Get me out of here. I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going back to my beanbag and sleeping.
Yeah. That's
we're all just working hard to give our dogs better lives.
Yeah.
It's one thing I was saying to Austin. It's like, you and I were just working hard so that Chorizo and Mr. Willoughby have the best life possible.
Yeah.
Spoiled dogs. So when it comes to pricing, what's the best lesson you've learned? Also, if anyone actually has any questions, I've seen them just come through now, and I'm definitely going to make sure we come back and answer it. But if you do have questions, pop them in the question box so I don't get them lost.
Cool.
But what's the best lesson that you've learned in pricing in your 72 years of?
In my 72 years. That's a great question. I think at first, when I, of course, first started out, I wasn't really considering licensing whatsoever, and I still think it seems somewhat new or surprising to some designers when I do send them a quote. And they're like, what's this licensing fee? I always have to kind of explain every so often, like, oh, when you're creating an illustration, you're essentially licensing that illustration because I could use this illustration over here for another client. So maybe like that's been the biggest like learning curve, is understanding licensing as its own world, because it truly is, and understanding like what a year license is for print, World Wide Web, social media usage versus like 5 years. And I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the difference between all that stuff. I just know it's kind of more of a gut reaction after doing so many projects. And again, I'm still reaching out to other.
And that's what comes with expertise. Time.
It's never easy.
Memory.
Exactly.
Oh no.
So
if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and then it'd be even more saturated. We don't want that.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
best lesson is basically like learning licensing, I guess, would be your lesson.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things that takes time. There's no like easy way to like learn how to do it without being like thrown a project and you're in this, the thick of it, and trying to figure it out as you're going along.
Yeah. And so when you're figuring it out and as you're going along, are you consulting old projects and kind of going, actually, that was probably underpriced, or I stuffed up there. I definitely need to make sure that I cover this in the next quote. Do you kind of go back and check that how you priced?
Yeah, for sure. I mean that we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier too, is like I don't reference projects too often. I guess it just depends on like where the or what the end goal is. Like if I'm doing like I seem to be getting a lot of sticker projects recently.
Sure.
And so I'm totally cool with that because they're usually really fun. So I think um with those types of projects, definitely easy to like price that stuff out now because I've had like 4 or 5 at this point where I know the value of, one sticker illustration, multiply that by, however many stickers, and then add in the licensing fee. What's the licensing fee for each sticker? So that becomes, I guess, kind of second nature after you do it so many times. But when
Yeah.
I'm pricing out, a completely different thing like a large ad campaign where they're using, 5 pieces that are solely being used in a US market for 2 years on print only, like that's where it gets super minute and you're like trying to figure out like what the hell does this cost? Like I could not even tell you what that costs right now
Yeah.
without, doing,
It's
I
all
guess, some
situational.
research. Yeah, it's so situational. It's so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. And I think that it's, you learn over time, you learn as you progress, and you kind of go, okay, I know that these are the things I can control. These are the things that are going to probably go to shit. So we'll prepare for that.
Yeah.
And then, these are the things that I, enjoyed in the process last time. Let's try and bake them in. Let's try and make sure that, like, make sure that they shout me out on socials when it works, or
Right.
that there's some way for me to bank or build off of that
Yeah,
for future
100%.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on at the start that you've recently started pursuing music, which is exciting.
hmm
So what prompted the move?
Um, that is an excellent question as well.
I feel like I'm asking excellent questions, and I think it's just the feedback that you're giving me on my questions.
They
So
are excellent questions because I'm like, I don't know the answer to a lot of these excellent questions because I have to sit here and think about them for a bit. So, I think the answer to that one is like kind of, I've been in like, I kind of touched on this when I was chatting with Martina Floor like last week or the week before.
Mhm.
And I kind of realized that I think I was in like a bit of a burnout stage without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And with that, of course, you're creatively drained in every possible way, but kind of like
Mhm.
still like I was still aware of everything going on, still clocking in, clocking out, doing the projects and whatnot. But I wasn't like super stoked, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm having the time of my life.
Mhm.
And one morning I woke up and I had that feeling. Like I could not explain or tell you what this feeling is without being like, I just feel like I need to create something right now or I'm going to explode.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how
I
it
know that
started.
feeling. I definitely know that feeling.
It's so new to me still because I think I've been like in burnout land for so long or something. I don't know. Um, I've
Which I
also
imagine
been
is just like everything like charred and like smoky.
yeah, that's
It's just
kind of
like,
how it feels. You're just kind of
hell.
like in this dull, sort of mindset or just kind of, I don't know, not a lot of excitement happening is
Mhm.
kind of how I explain it to myself at least. And then, I've also been going to therapy and I don't know if that's been helping in a number of ways, but like one day it was like a flip of a light switch. And I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? I got to explore, all these creative avenues that I've been wanting to explore and I've just been putting them off.
Yeah.
And, with that passion that was like burning in me, I was like, okay, I'm going to do ceramics. I'm going to do woodworking. I'm going to do music. I'm going to do, all these
Try and
things.
find something.
Right. And music was one of those things that I've been very interested in for a while. And I've just never pursued it because I thought, I know nothing. How am I going to like step my foot into this world of like music if I don't know? I literally know nothing. I haven't played an instrument. I haven't I haven't done anything prior to this point. And, one day I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to go back to school. And so I signed up for the Berklee College of Music. And I'm in my second class right now. My second class just started today. And
Awesome.
it's been going great. So far, so good.
Wicked. And I feel like it's such a cool outlet that is like, it's still creative, but it's in a certainly kind of a different flavor of creative.
Yeah.
We kind of have touched on music, and I've had music in my background. My partner's actually well, back in the day was a DJ, but also
Nice.
a music producer. So like he,
Okay.
in our first couple of months of dating almost 10 years ago, like he created a song that was for me. It's called Never Down. It's amazing. But
Oh,
like it's one of like those things where if you can create something that didn't exist before and they're actually like it's for someone or it's doing something or it's getting that little bit of passion that you're living in that moment and putting it
mm,
into something, it becomes almost nostalgic.
yeah.
Becomes all like almost like when you listen to that song, you're just like, oh, I'm way back there. I'm exactly like where I was when that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. It's kind of been more about, not so much like, again, talking about the destination of like knowing where my career is going. Like I have no goals set for this. My
Hmm.
only goal is I mean, I guess to some degree there are some goals. Like I want to learn, right? Like I want to know how to do, certain things on the piano or the guitar or whatever. And most of it is just enjoying the process along the way. That's kind
Yeah.
of the joy in creating, 9 times out of 10 is like enjoying the process, and
Yeah.
it's super pure right now, so I'm trying to like take it all in while it's still thriving. So far so good.
That's awesome. I've actually got a couple of artists that I'd love to share with you because they do a lot of behind the scenes of how they create music on YouTube. One of them is
Mm,
John Bellion, and he,
okay.
like just watching him, like all of his music is created by him, like all the different instruments, and then he layers, and then he like one of
Yeah.
those people that you're like, wow, your brain must be so interesting. Like it would
Yeah.
just be like,
I think I've seen one of those videos where it's like I'm thinking the same thing. Like he's got to have like a chaotic mind. Like I don't know
oh
how
yeah,
he's thinking all these different things because he's like, oh, I know exactly what to do. And so I want to get to that point where I'm like, oh, I know what this song needs. You know what I mean?
because that's where you are in design.
Right. That's kind of how it is with design, where I was like, oh, I know exactly what this piece of lettering needs, but I need to get to that point with music still.
Yeah, and that I think the journey there is really freaking exciting. Like
Yeah.
with watching the Belly on videos, like you see him cultivate and create a lyric in real time, and you're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing! Like, oh my
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing,
The
amazing.
process. I know.
Yeah, like the literal process living out. Now I'm going to go back and actually try and find this question because it was really good. From Gwendolyn LC. So I know you would always apply terms for how and where it would be used in licensing agreements, but are they also based on the period of time, or are they more commonly buyouts in perpetuity? I can talk a little bit to this, but I think that you're the more of the expert when it comes to licensing between the two of us.
Oh, no, take it away. I'm curious to hear what you think, and I can just chime in too.
So my understanding and learning from the other licensing people that are kind of putting out what they know in the space. So your Maggie and Torios, the girls at Lumia, which they are on next week. So we'll be doing like a licensing week next week, which will be really exciting.
Oh, nice.
Um, so that's Ilana Griffo and Katie made that.
Hmm.
So my understanding is that you can control any or either one or up to four of these kind of four things. So the time, the actual where it's going, so what is actually going on, where it can be distributed, and then I can't remember what the fourth one is. I always forget the fourth one.
I mean, for me, I'm just considering the time aspect for sure, and then the usage. I'm not really including any other factors, I guess, into that pricing. So
What about
time,
if it's like worldwide versus
oh,
space?
that's
So
what,
geography.
oh, geography, yeah. It just depends. Because again, every project isn't very that specific. Most of the time, it's just like, I guess, broad in the sense of like, okay, we need it for a year, social media usage. They're not really fine tuning it to, I guess maybe that's something I need to work on now that we're talking about it. I don't really ask that question because I just consider it part of, um, like the usage overall.
Okay.
But now I'm now I'm second guessing myself.
I mean, so when you say usage, what are you specifying there? So like the how, what, where, like all of the usage in its one kind of section.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm usually kind of like combining those few things, and then like the timing aspect is its own sort of characteristic, I guess.
Yeah.
But that ultimately is still sort of coupled together to create one price. It's not like separate prices for each of those
Yeah.
things.
And do you
So
find that when clients come back and they're like, oh, it's too expensive, which if you don't have that, let me know.
yeah, it happens to everybody
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the time.
You negotiate.
How do you negotiate?
Do you drop the time? Do you drop the units? What do you tend to change?
Yes. Another excellent question, because it just depends on the project. So like I just had this happen with a client that wanted, let's say, I think it was like 10 pieces of lettering, right? And let's say they wanted, these were all like individual words. So I said, okay, a word of, that essentially consisted of 3 to 5 letters. So I knew they were all about the same. So I knew I could like put an itemized value on that, be like, okay, like one word is equivalent to $500. So if I did $500 times however many of those, you get your price.
10.
Yeah. So you get your price. But if the client comes back and they're like, and then of course the licensing's added on to that.
Mm-hmm.
So if the client came back and they're like, oh, this is too much. In that case, I went to the creative director and I said, okay, well, what if we brought down, so you're trying to think of the ways to decrease the price. Not just literally decrease it, but literally remove the time invested generally.
Yeah.
So
Negotiating the deliverables, not the dollars.
exactly. So you're sort of delivering something completely different. If they're thinking, oh, this is too much, then you say, okay, well, what if we did 5 words instead of 10 words? Or what if we did 2 concepts instead of 3? Or what if we just did 1 concept and you just have to trust me till, the end of this project and you don't get any revisions? Like there's so many things that you could change. But that's a way to keep the costs lower, because there's a lot less time for you, the designer, to be invested in the project.
Yeah. So kind of to summarize for you, Gwendolyn, so you can kind of control the time or where it's going, what it's going on, like how many they're producing. So there's a big difference of license between, oh, I'm going to produce 50 t-shirts with your illustration and 5,000.
Right.
And I think that all really has a part to play. So some people, when they're doing licensing, kind of go, okay, it's a percentage of the end sale. Some people kind of look at what the kind of value is. How do you generally try and work out that license?
That's
a very good question.
Yeah. Because
I personally kind of go, okay, anywhere between 2 and 15% per item as the item cost, and then base that on the units and start kind of planning. But that's kind of just what I've only tried. I feel like it's as unique to the designer.
It kind of is. And maybe that's how I've like established these sort of like understandings of pricing in a year for print usage or something like that. Like there's really no way to answer that without a very specific prompt.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I'm using a very specific percentage is a buyout in perpetuity. So generally that is where you can say, okay, the artwork is $5,000. The buyout for that is, and it depends on your client. This kind of fluctuates for me because, of course I'm like, oh, I hope they go for this buyout.
Yeah.
So this generally is like 200 to 250%. Almost every single time, that is like my flat percentage for a buyout. And that's generally the case, I think, across the board. Feel free to like second guess that.
Because that like puts it in perspective. So like, and I know that it can be more. I know that it definitely can be more.
You could go to 300%. Yeah, I guess it just depends on again, like where this thing is it worldwide usage? Is it like only print usage, but they want to buy out? Like there's so many ways that this buyout can like sort of explode in the overall usage. But that's like the only time I'm generally doing like any sort of like percentage multiplication situation.
We're just doing a lot of like times tables and
Yeah.
just going back to our days of like, okay, 2 2s are 4, 3 2s are 6.
Exactly. I think like another thing to sort of mention is like the pricing ethical guidelines book by you have that book, you know which one I'm talking about. It's such a mouthful to
Look, it's an opportunity for showing off my pricing queen
nice.
ditchiness,
I
but
love
also
it. Yes, this book exactly. So that's the latest version. For everyone watching, highly recommend. That's kind of where I'm getting at least my baseline, because this is like a broad standard overall of like, this is the ballpark you should at least start in. And then that's kind of where, so at least I'm not like 100% clueless. Like I have somewhat of an understanding because of this book. And this book is, the end all be all for me. And it has been for like, 5 or 6 years at this point. So that's like the good starting point. And then I go from there and like try and sort of fine tune it for the client and the deliverables. And then of course, ask a friend. Like there's no easy way.
All of the options and all of the questions that you would get on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It's like 50-50, phone a friend, ask the audience.
I know. I feel like anytime I hit one of those scenarios, I'm just like, I call up Eric Murnovich and I'm like, dude, we got to talk about this. And then we're on the phone for like an hour every time. So
Eric
it's
was
hard.
amazing at Letter
He's the
West.
best.
Oh my God.
He's the fucking best. I love that guy.
Yeah. I love that like friendship has really kept going afterwards.
Blossoming.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to like, saying gut reactions. Like if you've gone and then you've gone, okay, so what's a flat fee for a surface pattern design? And generally it's that. And you're like, oh, no, there's your answer. Like charge more than that. Like
exactly.
That's your baseline and then build from there.
Right. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one of like, if you've got all of these, it's not just like, okay, here's the fee. You adjust based on 72 different factors and then kind of come up with one and go, okay, does it make me feel comfortable charging this? If it's too comfortable, do a little bit more. If it's really uncomfortable, that's probably all right.
Yep. 9 times out of 10. I swear to God, that's the case every time. I've had a number of clients, like I'll send them a quote and then they, you always know like when they approve it instantly, like I'll get an approval within like 30 minutes to an hour and you're like, oh shit, I should have gone higher. But, it happens to everyone. It's not something you can avoid. It's okay. You just learn from it and you move on and you price the next one better.
Yeah, exactly. It's if anything, that's going to be a really interesting learning process that you still get paid for.
Exactly. Yeah.
So You Bring Fire is the brand that you kind of operate under. What's the meaning behind You Bring Fire?
You know what? Let me open up my little PDF deck that I send to clients, because I'll just read it word for word because I guess essentially moral of the story, or at least like the understanding of how it sort of came to be. And I think I explained this to you, maybe.
Yeah, I think you did, but there was a lot in that Letter West experience. There was plenty.
That's okay. Okay, I'll try and do that. I'll try and simultaneously do this and talk. Okay, so the moral or the origination of like You Bring Fire. I used to listen to this band called Ivory Line. And Ivory Line is a like a Christian rock band from back in the day. Like, I don't know. I have no idea when they stopped making music. But I loved their music at the time. I'm not religious whatsoever. Their music is very heavily influenced in that realm. And I sort of listened to this thinking, and like anything in music, you sort of like interpret it as you do in your own little world, right? So at the time, I was just like, latching on to this idea of I don't quite know what exactly it was, but at the time it resonated with me, this song. And the song is literally called You Bring Fire. And so I was also on Tumblr back in the day when Tumblr was really big. And I use that as my Tumblr username. So like at this point, probably 10 years ago or so. And it's just been, you know, stuck with me ever since. It's now like sort of evolved with me and became like a part of me. And the thing I sort of tell people, this isn't even opening, but essentially I'll try and like paraphrase. What I try to tell people is like, what it's at least evolved into is this understanding of pushing myself to be the best version of myself that I think I can be, and never letting anyone else sort of like stray me from the path, and putting 100% of myself and my passion into whatever I do, whether that's, you know, a person that needs help, I can put passion into, you know, guiding them in some way, whether that's music, I can do that, whether that's literally anything. Ideally, it's just like putting passion into life, I guess. That's kind of the gist.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And that's, you know, we are definitely both people who are influenced by lyrics, by music, by the creative outputs that are around us. Like I on that weekend at Letter West, I illustrated a piece which was with John Bellion, who I've talked about a little bit. And the song is Stupid Deep, and like the lyric is, what if who I fought to be was always me, and the love I fought to feel was always free?
Exactly.
What if all the things I've done were just attempts at earning love, when the love I really need is stupid cheap?
Yeah, I love that.
And the hole inside my heart is stupid deep. Like it's just those kind of things that resonate, and you're like, oh, yep, there we go. There's the pull. There's that little like final puzzle piece in the puzzle that now just looks like a flat, like supposed to be there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. That's kind of like spot on right now.
Yeah, I
it.
feel like it's not generic enough, but it's applicable enough to take whatever the journey kind of changes for you.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. You know, I guess like kind of like my mantra, I think I have it on my website somewhere, is like losing control in heart and soul. And that kind of explains like that same sort of like putting the passion into someone or myself, and, you know, sort of like not being afraid to like set my soul on fire and be passionate about everything.
Yeah, literally everything all at the same time. Until we experience burnout, need to go and sit in a dark room for a couple of days, and then we pop back out and we're fine. Fine.
No.
So if you could go back to younger Scott and tell him something about pricing or about creativity or about the creative path, what would you say to Lil Scott?
Lil 27-year-old Scott. I don't know. I would probably say, you know, have some patience. A lot of like the burnout that I did experience, and I feel like a lot of people experience, is because we are in this social media bubble 24/7, comparing ourselves to every other designer, every other illustrator, whatever, and trying to reach this level of whatever, you know, sort of fame or following or client list or whatever that this person has, right? And we're trying to achieve this thing in, you know, ideally a shorter amount of time. And I did the exact same thing. Like I was a student in college, and I'm like trying to get on Jessica Hish level in, you know, a year. And we all know it's like, it's not possible. But for some reason, we're just like, oh, well, I'll get there, no problem, you know. And I continued to sort of push myself and try to cram all that stuff into, you know, a shorter amount of time. And that's how burnout sort of happens, is like you're just working 24/7 to the point where it's not healthy. And so anyway, that's kind of like, I guess my advice is like, let life happen. Like just coast. It's okay if you take a day off. It's okay if you take a week off. It's okay if you take a year off. Like whenever you get it done, you get it done. There's no rush.
I must say, one of the things that I enjoyed in some of your content was the the discovering of letters as the Australian. Oh, look here, we got an X.
Yeah. I always enjoyed making those
Wong
silly
and I
videos.
just sat there like giggling, and I feel like that's the opportunity for play. Like I feel like if you leave space for play as well, it can really start resonating and connecting with people who probably put you on this kind of space and pedestal and say, you know, you're this amazing, you're Scott Biersack, you do this and do that. And it's like, yeah, but Scott's also pretending to be an Australian going through his potted plants,
Exactly.
pretending to discover an X and teaching in his own weird way. And it's all about this, you know, what can you do different? What can you do in your own way? Not necessarily better, just in your own way, because it will reach someone else.
Yes, 100%. And that kind of, those little videos were, of course, so fun for me, solely because I was having fun. You know, it was just like showing a side of myself that I don't share too often. And I'm super thankful that I like randomly one day like had the, you know, I guess passion or idea to even do that in the first place, because it's kind of allowed me to transition my entire freelance business to sort of like portray myself completely differently than how I was before these videos. So those videos are like, have been, even though they're like incredibly stupid and silly, like they've been game changing for me in terms of like coming at, or like being at peace with like my true self almost, and allowing me to do that and portray that to everyone around me. So it's been great for the client relationships.
I actually feel like that's what Slice of Advice is for me. Like I kind of just started going live each week, and I remember how scared I was inviting my first 3 freelancers. I was like,
yeah,
you want to, you're agreeing to talk to me?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You want some comedy? Go back to the first Slice of Advice, and it's just like me going, okay, we're going live, everything's fine. And like in that one, my light turned off, my Bluetooth speaker that hadn't worked for 3 weeks is just like, well, you know what? This is my time to shine, and just like took over the audio.
Oh
like,
no. That's okay.
Yeah, it's totally okay, because now I've been able to like coach others through like the top 5 things that you need to consider when going live, and like helping them because of the things that I kind of fell over in. And, you know, now we're up to 14 episodes, and I've got some amazing connections and amazing friends that I might have only had bits and pieces over on Instagram, or I've met in person, or like I'm able to share with them and have them share with me, and we get to actually share it in this space of like, you know, getting more comfortable with, so other people ask other people's opinions and advice for pricing. What?
Yeah.
I thought that they knew everything.
I know. I thought the exact same thing until one day I was like,
human?
wait.
How rude.
I was thinking I was like, wait, I can ask somebody for this kind of stuff? And it just like, I don't know, one day it sort of dawned on me, like, yeah, you realize like, wait, we're all just in this sort of like creative game together. Like, why not help each other out along the process and like lift each other up? Like, it's not that hard. Like, I don't know. But some people are very protective about that stuff. I don't get it. I'd rather just like share everything and anything. So
I truly believe that knowledge and gratitude are the 2 most self-generating sources in our life. So like if you can do more, and it will come back to you. Like it'll 100%. Definitely start doing all of that circulation, or it will pass on to someone else. It's definitely an amazing sort of thing to be doing. Cool. This is really, really cool, and it was actually really awesome to reconnect with you.
It's been too long.
I know. I don't think I'll be coming over to America anytime soon. Just putting it out there.
That's okay.
And you might not be coming to Australia anytime soon either.
But I don't think so.
No. It's a very weird world out there. I don't know if you saw, but this time last week, we were, you know, having an earthquake for the first time ever. So, insane. You know, insane. But I really hope that we can, you know, keep chatting. And if anyone here watching today has any questions for myself or Scott, Scott's an awesome guy. You should
feel free to reach out. I'm always here, guys.
Side note, when I connected you with Kitty, so Kitty Jardinil, she was just like, Scott, talk to me. I'm such a big fan. Like what? But like this dude's real. Like
Yeah.
so you know,
I'm
shout
just a
out to
human.
Kitty.
Yeah.
Here is the human that you are really. So that way it's for you, Kitty. If you're
Yes.
watching.
Yes.
But thank you so much for joining me, Scotty. Scott, I know that you and I are going to be keeping chatting, and I'm probably going to be sending you lots of stuff. Is there anything you want to say to anyone else out there before we head off?
Yeah, I mean,
how can they get in contact with you? How can they follow you? That probably should be one of the things. Yeah, cool. He's pretty good at Jenga too. Becca, that's true.
Yes.
That's true.
Thank you, Becca. I am. I still have those videos on my phone, and I randomly rewatch them, and it just brings me so much joy. I've got
so many boomerangs of like all the speakers jumping. Or that night of us like all painting all of the mural.
Yeah. Oh, such a good time.
The two truths and a lie games, and the food.
Good stuff. But yeah, I mean, you guys can find me at You Bring Fire across all social platforms. hello@youbringfire is my email. If you want to email me any questions you may have about anything in particular, I always email people back is usually my thing. Like, I don't really leave an email unanswered, just so you guys know. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I can't do it either. It just hurts me. It hurts me to hit delete.
They've taken time. I need to take time.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions for anything else, feel free to hit me up. I'm always here.
Awesome. And if you are wanting to get a bit more clarity on what you should be charging as your billable hourly rate, not the rate that you share with customers, but actually working out what your value of your time is, head over to easyaspricing.com/calculate to grab your free access to my billable hour calculator. Thank you so much for joining me, Scott. I will definitely be talking to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a good day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.